Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
Good Saturday afternoon out there, everyone, and welcome to what is still your #1 source for Native American television news. It is now Mvskoke Vision. I am still Jason Salzman. You're still going to have the wonderful stories that you've come to know and expect from us for over 10 years now and over 600 episodes. We're just in the bit of a rebrand here at Mvskoke Media, and with that newness, we have changed our name, Mvskoke Vision, and we are really tailoring everything to a more modern sense and pulling in everything with our other mediums here at the department: radio, print, television, online material, and with that sense we wanted to tie everything together. And so now we are Mvskoke Vision, but I'm excited to tell you that nothing changes, business as usual here. And our first story of this week, we tell the story of a Creek Choctaw symphony conductor that visited Tulsa as a guest conductor for the Tulsa Opera for the Stars Align production. Timothy Long.
I'm Timothy Long. I'm from Holdenville originally. I've lived in New York for 28 years, and I'm a classical musician and a member of the Creek tribe. Tulsa Opera is celebrating its 70th anniversary, and they're having a gala concert on Saturday night, and they asked me to come in and conduct it, so that's why I'm here. My mother, who is Choctaw and will be at the concert Saturday night, is she grew up in a boarding school. Well, it was an orphanage, the Goodland Orphanage down in southeastern Oklahoma, and she had bad luck. I mean, she grew up there, and then while she was in high school there, she caught tuberculosis, and she ended up being quarantined at the Talahena Indian Hospital for a total of 5 years. It's before they had treatment for tuberculosis. And you know, with the Indians, they did experimental treatments. They tried out all these things, and she saw a lot of death, and a lot of her friends didn't make it out. But the thing that I benefited from, you know, from her sorrows, is that everybody listened to country and western music in this hospital, and she got sick of the twang. So she found a classical radio station, and when my sister and I were born, she only listened to Beethoven. So she listened to Beethoven symphonies, piano concertos, and piano sonatas, and that's the only music I heard until I was probably 5 or 6 when I started playing the piano. So really, my classical music came from having a native mother. If not for her, you know, I probably wouldn't have found this, because, you know, we weren't wealthy people, and there aren't many classical musicians in Holdenville either. So it was all completely due to her. I grew up playing, I don't know, maybe 10 instruments. I started piano when I was 3, and then I started saxophone in the 5th grade, and then flute, then oboe, then French horn. Then I played all the wind instruments, and then I taught myself violin. And when I was at OCU, I studied both piano and violin. And then I went to grad school in piano, because I felt like, well, I may as well focus on something. And I discovered at a music festival in Aspen when I was a lot younger that I loved opera. I got a fellowship in opera, in playing piano for opera. And I went back to school, and I got the opera fellowship there. And then it just really suited me well. So I started coaching at Juilliard. I moved to New York, and then I started doing professional gigs. And then I was hired at Aspen to coach opera, and we were doing an American premiere of Thomas Addis's Powder Her Face. And the conductor, who was the composer, Thomas Addis, had visa trouble. So they called me in, said, "You're the only person who knows this, and we have an orchestra rehearsal tomorrow." So I suddenly had to conduct an orchestra rehearsal of a very complex piece, and I'd never conducted. And so that was exciting. And then I got a few other opportunities. And you know, it's really weird when you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes it's easier. And then you get to this point where you start realizing where you need to educate yourself, and you have to take a dip and start learning everything that you've realized needs to be learned. So I don't know, it just sort of happened organically, strangely enough. I'm not a terribly ambitious person, so I was never calculating, how do I do this, how do I do that? I just loved music all the time. And I still perform on piano as well, and perform as a conductor, and I teach, so it still encompasses my life the same way it did when I was 5 years old. In that sense, it doesn't feel like it's changed at all. I suppose there is a sense of getting lost in it, in that the rest of the world ceases to exist. But with classical music, there are a lot of difficulties. You know, with a lot of pop music, the reason that I think it's easy to get into it is because it's a little bit, you know, the beat. There's a beat that happens over and over and over, kind of like a powwow. I mean, it's always there. So you know when it's gonna fall, you know what to expect, and it fulfills your expectations. With classical music, you'll have a beat going like this, and then it stops. And it's like, you know, when those powwow songs, when the drum just stops suddenly and everybody has to stop. Same way with the orchestra, so you can't completely lose yourself. You always have to be aware as a conductor, visually, orally, even physically. You have to be aware. Every little motion that you make can either cause somebody to play or to not play, or it can confuse them. So you have to be aware on many different levels, while at the same time, hopefully opening yourself up, like Jason was saying, to sort of lose yourself in the music and to enjoy it and to really connect emotionally. It can be fantastic.
And our thanks to Timothy once again. We're going to wish him safe travels back to New York City, and very exciting life he leads there, doing a lot of great things in the music world. And we're so glad to be able to it was fortuitous that he was in town. We were able to catch up with him, show a wonderful story of a Mvskoke Creek citizen doing great things out there. Speaking of Mvskoke Creek Nation, our principal chief, James Floyd, a couple of weeks ago in his State of the Nation address, really stressed the master plan, things that he wants to really get rolling in his next 2 years of his first administration here. And one of the things that he really stressed was the master plan, getting some things done in and around Okmulgee and the main campus. And because of that, we wanted to request an interview for him to sit down and talk about the master plan. We were provided with portions of that master plan, documents drawn up, and we went over them and asked him questions. And here is Chief Floyd about the Mvskoke Creek Nation master plan.
We have assets and resources, natural resources in this area that are existing with no concept of what we're going to use that resource for, or any strategy that brings everything together. So the master plan was looking at approximately a 5-mile radius from the intersection out here to look at all of our properties and how we can best utilize them going forward, not just in the next year or so, but in the outlying years. And so the council approved the funding of the study. Study was completed and the council approved their report. The concept is, how can we best utilize these resources to draw people to Okmulgee? We have a lot of good things here, including our complex grounds that are known as visitor locations. So we wanted to make sure that we showcase them the right way, that we utilize them in the best way, and that in the future, any design and any expansion will be built around what we have available here. And if you don't mind, I'll talk about where we are right now on this ground here, this, I think, 40-acre site that we have. We have buildings that are at least 40 years old, and their useful life is about to end. And so the design that was in the master plan takes into consideration the age of the facilities and lack of facilities that we need to meet the citizens' needs, and to lay that out in a manner that showcases our culture, the utility of where the buildings are located so that people can access them easily, and positions us in a very positive way to the public. They can see us from the highway, and they can come in and see the architecture, the walkability of our campus and things like that. So when we look at this 40-acre site here, you can easily see that the layout lends itself to one that would attract people to come and see it, and as well as us using it as a functioning government complex.
So talk about what areas did the architects kind of analyze and provide reports for?
They analyzed basically every aspect of our operations and spoke to several hundred people, including the National Council members, community members, stakeholders, citizens, employees, I think in every building. So they spent a lot of time gathering information about the missions of the different programs, the needs of the programs, the alignment of the programs, where they felt it would be best located to serve people's needs. And so the document does go into depth about the numbers, like square footages or square feet of a building, and then the architect's idea of where it should be located. And so that's included in the plan.
Now, there's other pieces of this plan. We were able to get copies of the tribal complex plan and the cultural center plan. Can you give us a statement on maybe why we don't yet have access to like the industrial site or some of the other plans?
Mm-hmm. Well, the other parts that we have, the industrial site and the Omniplex site, has some commercial aspects to it. And for example, the travel plaza. And we know that in the plan it has a replacement for that. So there's going to have to be negotiations, and there's negotiations ongoing now, and there's got to be a lot of contracts negotiated regarding, many operations within that place. Just like the travel plaza down the street has a restaurant, has other things, fuel, all these things have to be negotiated. And so because we haven't decided on a brand or concept or the suppliers and things like that yet, we, because of the agreements that we have with the individuals that we're talking to, until we get it signed and it's approved by the council, we really can't, we don't want to jeopardize the work and expose somebody who may not want to be exposed. A lot of these things are private businesses, and they want to remain anonymous. However, as soon as they are complete and the council does approve it, then we're going to really promote it heavily because it will be great. We're just not there yet.
You have an estimated timeline on what you're looking at for that?
I hope that in one sense, the main one we just mentioned, that by the end of this year, that will all be completed. And that's the goal. There's meetings I'm not involved in that are ongoing, and so as soon as they can arrive at the agreements, then we will begin to provide the details of that, and so it will be happening soon.
So talk about some highlights as far as like the tribal complex plan that you are able to talk about.
The tribal complex plan includes at least several new buildings. One for the Attorney General, court system, so they can have their own buildings. Eventually it will have a new light horse station, which will probably have a detention facility located next to it. And it will take some things that are governmental but are really, the machinery and other things that we have, and locate them off this campus and onto another campus. And so you will begin to see the development of this property built around the concepts that's shown in the master plan. Now, as to when this will occur, we don't know. The value of the strategic plan is that it gives us data that we can use for grants. We can approach, federal officials and private groups that provide grants for governmental use, and we hope to leverage our information as much as possible so that we can do as much as we can without having appropriations from the National Council. Now, again, the timeline may be that I think first you will probably see the entrance being changed to the west side of the complex grounds, because we know that's a fairly straightforward thing to do. Department of Transportation has already approved an entrance, and so we will use transportation money to begin to change that road, and some of the infrastructure issues, utility issues and things like that will begin to, I guess, reroute. Right now, what we found was that because buildings were just built at different times using different technologies and different funds, there was never a systematic way to track all the underground utilities and things like that. So one of the first things that we will be doing is mapping out all the existing utilities, probably designing those for the future, marking them so that we know where they are, and then begin that work. But there's no time and no funds presently for a new building yet. But what this does do is to allow us to begin to look for those funds and start that process.
You have any idea on what like an amount of funding that you would be looking for in order to complete, everything in the plan?
That's a good question. The amount is uncertain right now. It's dependent upon a number of factors. We know it's millions of dollars, and we know we can't get millions of dollars in 1 year. So this is going to have to be spread out over a period of time. One challenge that we have on our campus here is that part of our land are in the floodplain. So we need to do some groundwork here to get some of our land that's in the floodplain raised up, and then we can begin to develop that for our use. And so others that are below the floodplain will use as some type of walkway or something like that. And but again, the idea is that citizens can come on to the property and just with little effort access services that they need, and then employees can use it also to walk from one location to another, and we won't have the congestion in the parking lots that we have now.
One of the items that's listed in the tribal complex plan is shared studio space between public relations and Mvskoke Media. Is that indicative of like a merger between the departments, and are you aware of any plans to repeal the Free Press Act?
Yeah. Well, we talk about the the thinking behind the efficiency of our government, because that's what drives the decision making. And when we had the firm look at that, they presented the plan that you can save cost instead of having 2 studios and 2 separate ones, to maybe co-locating them in the same building, and just block out the time, similar to the conference room we're in now. It's used by a lot of different groups. They book the time that they need. We have somebody keep the schedule. One group comes in and they leave, and another group comes in. And so that was the concept. That was one of the later parts of the plan. So as a plan, all things can be moved, but that's one that was put in toward the end by the firm that we used. But the reasoning is that you can build a building, or you can build 2 buildings. You can double the cost, or you can have 1 cost and share and be more cost efficient. And that's really the approach that they used, and that's explained in their footnotes and other documents that they have attached to the plan.
Let's talk about the cultural center plan. One of the things in reading this, I guess they went out to the former Okmulgee Country Club to analyze best use of that property, and their suggestion is a cultural center that would include many different elements. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, to date, we've not had a good solid plan of the country club property. We haven't acted on many, offers to use it as a golf course, because we know that there's a decline in golf courses throughout the United States, and to activate one here may not be viable financially. We're already managing one, so we chose not to go that route. However, in looking at the grounds there, it really begins to open itself up for cultural center similar to other tribes. And we have had the country club building placed on the State Historic Register. We've also had a structural engineer take a look at that. Structurally, it's sound, and so that would be our first step, is to get the resources to begin to restore that building back to its original design, and we can do that. The idea is that instead of having an addition to it, which we had considered, was instead to have separate buildings that would house our inventories of things, cultural preservation, our history center and things like that, as well as cultural items that are cultural activities that we have, bow making, canoe making, things like that, on the site, so that people can come out, see things live, walk the grounds. The trail system there lends itself very well to walkability, so it would be something that could continue to be built upon in out years. There is a lot of open space there. They didn't put in there that we could put in like a amphitheater or something like that, but it can be done. So what we will be doing through our cultural nonprofit is to seek funds through foundations and federal grants, so that we can expand the resources that we can gather without going to the council, or at least match. And then I think we can begin to see that transform and be something that will, again, bring people to Okmulgee, but it still be functional daily use by our staff. And it gets all of our cultural preservation folks in one location.
What does that do to the spaces that we have currently in downtown Okmulgee for the cultural center and archives?
The cultural center and archives are in different places right now. The cultural center is really the visitor center. So we're making the visitor center be a kind of a subset of that. And the council house is, separate, and we're getting that complete. But the visitor center will be just that, a visitor center with some things in it, but it'll be a place that they can go as a starting point to then be directed out to the cultural center. And it'll hold, the main floor is very large, and so we can hold community events out there, art showings and other things like that that we don't have space for now, and we can draw from our archives. So that's how those things begin to tie together.
So looking at these plans, it's going to take several years. Is there a plan for you to run again for chief in order to really work on that?
Well, that's not in that plan, by the way. And it wasn't designed for that purpose. It's not a political document. Regardless who sits as here's the principal chief, that's a document they can follow for the design of this property in the future. We wanted to make sure that we had a master plan. It's required by the council. There hadn't been one in place for a number of years, so this is the first time in several years that we have a master plan. So it fulfills that requirement, and I think they've done a very good job of it. We're fortunate that two of the main people that helped, one was Creek, one was Uchi, and so they personally were very vested in this and wanted to make sure that everything that we did had symbols of our culture, aspects of our culture, and things like that. So that was really the driving force there. It's really nothing personal with me or anything like that that was in that. Matter of fact, all the employees pretty much has some print on the master plan.
Nope.
Anything else you would like to add?
Well, I think that as we began to publicize this more and began to develop portions of it, I believe that people will begin to see the uniformity of what we're trying to do so that our culture is displayed in everything that we have. And that goes back to the original premise of how do we utilize our properties and our assets and our resources to attract people to Okmulgee, and so that they can stay here, and so that they can spend their money here, so that we can take advantage of that, which then provides revenue to expand and do even more. So that premise, I think, is well displayed in the plan itself.
Well, that'll do it, folks. It's another episode of what you formerly knew as Native News Today, now Mvskoke Vision. We're so proud. We want you to let everybody out there know we're not changing a thing except the name. It's going to be Jason Salzman here in studio pitching all these great stories that you've come to know from us for the past 10 years. So everybody out there, have a great week. For Jared Moore and myself, we'll see you next time here on Mvskoke Vision.